Good evening and welcome to the first ever REP-ort.
The
Char thought of it. I can't take credit, but it's
report.
funny.
I did think of it in the last like 30 seconds too, which I'm pretty proud of. Personally, pretty proud of that one.
Heck yeah, I love it. The report is going to be a style of segment where we do a bit more of a deep dive. Char has been alluding in the past couple weeks that we'll do one on game design, specifically centered around RoboMasters and kind of the robotics game design. Today, hopefully, as the title portrays, we're going to be doing a report on coaching and specifically coaching in RoboMasters, what that can look like, why the heck would you do it, so on and so forth. I'm excited, Char. I got thoughts. I got a lot of thoughts. We will not be doing a question of the day because this is basically a long form question of the day. But let's start kind of at the, as I would like to say, let's start at the place in the middle, like where people can understand. Esports coaching is already weird enough, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so different than I mean, maybe we even start with sports coaching. I'm gonna quick segment on sports coaching, 20 words. Sports coaching, you have a coach that helps you train, that helps you practice, and then during the game, they make decisions for you during the game, for the team, is what the coach does. They interact with you during the competition. They're switching players in and out. They're calling plays. They're moving things and pieces of the overall strategy, right? And then they can give you input. They're not playing on the field, right? But that's regular sports coaching. Touch some grass. That's how sports works, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Preston. Going into esports coaching a little bit differently as well. You're not just a playmaker for your team. You're not deciding, oh, here's the exact play we're making. You're not deciding, oh, this is exactly what we're doing. The players are a lot more involved in that process in esports. A coach is really more about like, I'm an outside observer who can watch the stream, who can watch what you guys are doing gameplay wise, who can see the whole state of the field, not have to worry about the micro, for example, at like League of Legends, and therefore can help you with the more macro side of the strategies. I think of coaching in like
kind of. But that's, you've highlighted the point that I want to get at. Yes.
Yeah.
But one of the huge differences is that they don't give any input during the game.
Yes, exactly. No input during the game. Yeah.
So a League of Legends coach is only there in the voice chat with the boys during draft. So like during champion selection. They're talking about what the team strategy should be. I've loved Los Ratones. It's the team that Cadril has put together. It's a streamed team. So he streams all of their content. It's been a really interesting look into esports coaching. Mm-hmm. But once the game starts, then like the coach has no input on what happens. So like they have an original strategy. Maybe they have a couple contingencies, but as soon as draft pick is over, that coach is out of the voice chat, and it's just the team playing and trying to kind of play out the vision that their coach has portrayed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually there's this kind of reminds me. This is a slight side tangent, but I'll bring it back, and I'll bring it back in an interesting way. So in Melee, which is the esport that I come from, I'm sure I've talked about it a million times at this point. I apologize to everyone. This is like the 17th time you've heard it from me. But for Melee, we used to not allow any coaching. And then for a brief period of time, you were allowed to have someone sit next to you as you're playing, and they would just coach you throughout the entire match.
Huh.
We very quickly banned that after 3 years because it was an absolute travesty to have. It was horrifyingly annoying. There was like coaching, like counter picks. You would pick someone who like really knows how someone plays to coach you in a specific match to get like counter pick information on them. Yeah. There's all kinds of horrifying things that occurred, which is part of the reason why we don't do counter picking anymore in the coaching, which is why we don't do coaching anymore for Melee, at least. And it sounds like the same thing like in League, where you're not allowed to coach during the match. You coach at the very beginning. You can ask your coach, like, what should I keep in mind? What should I think about? You can practice with them a little bit beforehand. But once the game starts, you are in that set. You are there. You don't get a timeout. You don't get a stop. You go through the whole way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask you if there was any type of coaching in Melee, but I kind of assumed the answer would be no, because it's not a team sport.
Yes.
Right? Is Melee, I assume, is always 1v1, right? Even though it can take teams, like technically?
Melee is 1v1. There's occasionally some like 2v2 stuff that happens. Doubles is what we call it, but it's not nearly as recognized, represented.
Gotcha.
And then finally, there's crew battles, which are more for fun, anyways. And they're like 5v5 formats where you kind of like swap off people as they get eliminated. Think tennis
Oh,
style.
nice.
But yeah, those are another whole thing instead, right?
I gotcha. Yeah, so that's kind of how esports coaching functions, right? They're there in between games, they're there at the beginning of games. So let's talk a little bit about just giving a review and a refresher before we step into the meat of today's episode, which will be RoboMaster's coaching. In esports coaching, the coach is primarily looking at how are we going to maximize the strengths of our players. They're going to look at how do we attack the weaknesses of the other team. Right, they will be the ones doing a lot of research, watching a lot of the other teams playing, so that your individual players can focus a bit more on micro and their own macro play, but not maybe what should be referred to as like super macro, where not it's not how
Yeah.
you're playing the game, but it's how you're playing the game and how that interacts with how someone else is playing the game, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of what they're doing, right? And obviously the coach's goal is to help the team win, but in a multi-game series, in my opinion, the role of the coach also becomes to form a long-term strategy. So outside of even one game against that opponent, the coach has this really far-facing vision of, okay, we're playing a best of 5. You can't just run the same thing back. For lots of reasons, your opponent is going to switch up how they play, right? Sometimes the format just doesn't allow it. League of Legends has switched to a format now where it's called Fearless Draft. When a champion is played, they're banned for the rest of that like best of 5 series, and it just
Wow.
like changes the champion pool as you go through. And
Hmm.
that's really the meat of esport coaching. Anything, Shar, you feel like I've missed that, or chat? You got something, your favorite esport, some Overwatch or Valorant coaching thing that's huge that I've missed because of my lack of knowledge on Valorant?
No, I think that's basically everything I would say. So
All right.
I
So
feel like
now
you've nailed
let's
it right on
so
the head.
let's jump into RoboMasters, right?
Oh yeah, that's the fun stuff.
Let me know in the comments right now if you are on a RoboMasters team, did you even know that you can have a coach? Shar, this is the rep channel, so we can talk about it. Can they have a
Mhm.
coach? That's what I want to
They,
talk about with you because I
I
dug
believe
up the
they're allowed.
rules,
Uh-huh.
and this is the snippet I found, but I only found this snippet in the RMUC rules. And it says it's the only time there's a tactical the tactical coach. So the
Mhm.
tactical coach, basically what this paragraph is saying, is allowed to enter the driving room when the robot operators, aka the drivers, are in their preparation period. So their 3-minute preparation period, the drivers and the coach can be in that room together. The coach has to be out by the time that 3-minute period is up, and then they can come back into that drive room every time, in between games during that 3-minute preparation period. But
Yeah.
notably, I only found that snippet in the RMUC rules.
Interesting. That is interesting. I know it used to list how many people were part of your like drive team, and one of those included used to be a coach. So remember that I did that for a little bit.
I control
Um,
left the word coach in the North American version of the RMUL rules, and I got squat.
Interesting. It might have been missing. I will do a quick little search for the section that I remember it's in and
But
see if it's still there.
for the purposes of tonight, and I'll actually, depending on how long everyone lets me ramble tonight, I might address it later. But for the purposes of tonight, we will assume that RMNA and RMUL are just fine with you having a coach as long as it plays within the same rules as RMUC.
Yep.
Um,
I think it's fair.
yeah, so that's very very similar to like a League of Legends style esports coach, where the coach is there for the preparation period, which is our equivalent of like a draft time. It's about 3 minutes long. It's right before each game. You already know who the opponent is. You already know who the other team's drivers are. You already know what robots they're fielding, right? Because sometimes it's a hero. Well, not anymore, but sometimes it used to be hero standard or standard standard. Um, it can look a lot of different ways, right? There were teams that had different standards they could field, sometimes balancing, sometimes not. So at that point, right, you know what's happening on the field, and that coach is there to give that support. We have a special guest today to help us dive into RoboMaster's coaching.
Guest.
The former coach from Texas A&M. If you've been hanging out with us in these rep channels, you know him as Colonel John. Hilariously, that was his username before he actually started serving the country in the military. So it's kind of a fun name now because I don't think that he's actually Colonel John, but I still love it. Colonel John will be joining us to discuss more about RoboMaster's coaching and the kind of the role that it has. So let's bring him on in here.
Howdy, everybody.
Hello, John.
What's up?
Ooh, let me make sure the people can hear you. There we go. All right. We should be good now.
Good?
I think we're good. Yeah.
All right. We got so many things to talk about. I want to make sure we talk about it in somewhat of a logical order. So let's start with RMUC. John, I know you personally didn't get to go to RMUC, but you have enough experience as a coach on a RoboMasters team. Let's talk about kind of the role that coach plays in an RMUC setting, so that way we can start to look at the differences and really dive into RMNA in and of itself, right?
Absolutely. I think in RMUC, the role of a coach is, I want to say, a lot more dynamic, right? You've got the 7v7, you've got all these different game objectives to look at. And I think if you've really done your due diligence, you've got a lot of sort of staple teams in RMUC. And so you're going to go back and look at kind of what they're doing, what their relative performance levels are, look at how they're playing the match. And I think your job as a coach is like, okay, based on how they play, based on what the strengths of our pilots and our robots are, how are we going to attack these objectives? Knowing that knowledge, imparting it on your team before you go play, and then sending them, and then as the rounds go on, just making little adjustments. You shouldn't have to invent anything on the spot. It should all be very well sort of figured out, right?
Yeah. Also, I mean, one of the big differences I want to highlight is RMUC, the drivers are in like a very soundproof box with headphones on inside of that box, and they're behind one-way glass. So it used to be, we'd see it all the time, but RMUC teams will have like sign language and little signs that they hold up to communicate with the drivers during that preparation period. So part of the coach's role is just like, that's the only person that's allowed to come into the driver room during that period, right? So anything you need to communicate, and like John's saying, I think John has hit the nail on the head for pre-round one, right? Pre-round one, you're saying, hey, today we're playing against the University of, let's go with Virginia Tech. Today we're playing against Virginia Tech. Their hero's super strong. They love to backdoor the base. Make sure you're watching out for that. Like, this is crazy important. Well, then you play game one, right? And Shaur and I have painfully watched a couple matches this, like last week actually, where the hero was missing high on every single freaking shot on the base, right? And everybody can see it except for the hero driver. He's looking through a dirty scope. Like, the hero driver's grandma is at home in his living room and is like, dude, aim down. But there's not a way for them to communicate to the driver. And so the coach can also help communicate those in between game things, yes, strategy wise, but also just like, hey guys, you got to aim a little lower. You're missing high. He can say things, right, in 7v7s especially, like, hey, they're using their drone and their sentry to take out the outpost, like, or their heroes hiding over here. Things that the drivers might not be aware of, or that they just can't see because they don't have that third-person view of the map. So on RMUC, those things are super critical because the communication is so limited, right? And that is the crux of, maybe Shaur, usually I'm the one that gets to play devil's advocate, but as the one kind of playing devil's advocate here, maybe it would be why some teams feel like they don't need a coach for RMNA. The communication is way more open, right?
The person you need. However, see, this is my thing. This is my thing about coaching, right? I feel like coaching is something that's really important to I feel like having someone who is dedicating the mental space throughout the entire week to specifically think about strategy, think about what other teams are doing, think about what other teams are actually going to be playing. What are you playing? What are your ideas? Where are you messing up? Could save a lot of teams a lot of headache.
Yeah.
I recently rewatched every single match uploaded to YouTube. And I do say every single one because I did rewatch all of them to create a
No
little
way.
stats database. I did
No
rewatch all
way,
of them.
Shaur. There's
This
some
stats
from
database,
2021. There's no way
I
you
watched
rewatched.
all those 2021. I even
Oh.
watched the 2021 VOD we have where it's uploaded and it's just Preston going, well, PSU has retired, so this is actually not going to happen today. And the VOD ends right there.
That's
and I
what I'm
sat there
talking
and went,
about.
this
I
isn't
was like,
even a
there's
match.
no way. All right.
I watched all of them. And there are definitely some matches where I see like a team play something where they start attacking, for example, someone's hero instead of attacking the sentry. And the sentry health is 560 to 430. They have 30 seconds left.
Yes.
If they had just attacked the sentry for like 20 of those 30 seconds, maybe even just 10 of those 30 seconds, right? And then went to go stop the hero from base breaking, which that hero did not base break, by the way. That hero just stayed in the reload zone, not even being a threat, just sat there in that match. They just gone for the sentry. If they just had someone dedicated to strategy who could say, like, remember your objectives, keep in mind the objectives, right? Just someone who was thinking about that and could point that out to them. That was a 2-0 victory for that person, and one of the top 4 teams of 2023 would not be a top 4 team right now. And that's crazy to me, in my opinion. That's what happens when you don't have someone dedicated to strategy who will think through these rule sets, who will know, like, how do you actually win the game? Because it's not about just having the best robot. You also have to think about, how am I going to win the game? What is my win condition? For example, if I ask like a majority of team members right now, I don't think they realize that the win condition is completely different this year. It's
No
not
way.
just
Put a poll. Put a poll.
It's not break the basis. Okay, how many people think we can't do polls yet? We still don't have enough followers.
No, I'm saying from like the RoboMaster North America YouTube. Throw a poll on the YouTube channel, and just put like, you got to make it. Hold on, you gotta make the question so it doesn't lead them to the right answer. You got to say like, what do you think the biggest change of this year has been? And then be like the map terrain, and then be like, CU's totally gonna beat UW this time, and then the third one will be like, capture the point versus bases.
Well, even beyond capture the point, I guarantee you there are some people who are going to play this new 3v3 game and are going to go, oh, I have to attack their sentry first before the point opens, or something like that. They're going to think the sentry is still like an objective. You can kill that thing as many times as you want. You can make it die as many times as you want. It adds no value outside of giving 20 points like every other robot does to the amount of capture points you have. Yeah. That's the only value it adds. And that's why that's the thing that I'm like, it's a very unique way of changing your mindset on the game, that if you don't have someone who's dedicated to strategy, reading these rules, etc., they won't realize that connection. And they'll, like, you might still be playing like as if it's 2024, right? And that's why I'm like, you really need to have someone at least just reading the rules, if nothing else, who will know it very well, and you can go to and be like, hey, was that a rule? Another example from competition. Whenever UW Sentry was healing in the middle, right? UW Sentry healing in the middle during the 2023 competition should not be allowed.
Yeah,
it was
totally
not allowed.
Yep,
VT
totally
could have and should have appealed that match.
Yeah.
They didn't. Why? Didn't read the rule, didn't have someone dedicated to just watching the match to see, oh, why did that sentry heal in the center? That's totally like not legal. Please, ref, do something. Right? Like, didn't happen. But
so
anyways, that's my rant. But John,
I have some thoughts here, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Because we've seen through a lot of topics or subtopics here. All right. To preface this, I think that somebody understanding the rules and kind of knowing all the technicalities therein, that is important. But teams that have strategy, I don't know how many teams in North America utilize some form of strategy team or group of people that are designed for that. But from my understanding, the sort of meta on that, if you will, is you're going to have a strategy team. There are going to be a few people who are going to understand the rules, that are going to take your rules quiz for you. And maybe if they want to go the extra mile, they'll sit down, watch some old matches, and come up with some basic strategies. And whoever you stick in the driver's seat, they're going to, hey, do this, and maybe life will be better for you, right? I think that is a very, very flawed way of looking at things. I think that, especially for RMNA, for RMUL, we can get in the nitty gritty of the strategy and positionings and rotations and all this other stuff, and we can do that, and that's valuable. But I think as a coach in RMNA, that is not it's not your job, but that is not all of your job. I
Yeah.
think that because we talk about the difference between an esports coach and versus more traditional coaching, like in sports, I think that the difference is actually not that extreme in that most of the work you do should not be on game day and it should not be in the rule
Mhm.
book. I think a lot of teams are divided into sub teams that their job for that year is going to be to build the standard or build the hero or build the software. Well, in strategy, you're not just looking through rules, you're building something too. You're building a team. Your job as a coach, more than anything, your job should be to build a team. That is your
Yeah.
product. And so I think that if you, and like I say, hopefully we'll get into that a little bit more about what that actually entails. But I think if you build a team and you've done it properly, a lot of the misplays that you see, even if you don't spend 1 minute or day of your time on sort of the nitty gritties of strategy and rule technicalities, you're going to, cut down on your misplays so much, and it would win teams in North America a lot of matches.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so
very fair.
so maybe because I want the result of this episode, and maybe I should have prefaced, I want the result of this episode to be a place that teams can go for advice on developing a strategy section for their RMNA team.
Mhm.
Because Shaur and I have had the wonderful but painful opportunity to watch a lot of teams lose games they should have won with either good coaching or what I'm about to say right now, which is what I think John was also saying. I think John and I will agree on the fact that the coach would also be expressing the expectation that the drivers are familiar with the rules themselves, right? Like if we look at like regular sports, the coach is not the one, like if you're beyond like, I don't know, like 6-year-old flag football, like the coach isn't the one that's explaining how flag football works anymore,
Yeah.
right? It's
True.
not like,
True.
hey guys, I read the rules, you actually can't do that. Like you can't just throw
Mhm.
the ball whenever you want, or like if you can't just like kick it forward. um like it's so I think what a subsection of what John is saying, a subtext of what John is
Mhm.
saying, is that the individual drivers need to take some personal responsibility to really understand the rules. Um, Shar, can I ask you? I mean, it's a little bit tangential, but
Yes.
NYU in
Please do.
particular rules quiz.
Uh-huh.
Does it look like the same desperate, like y'all are just kind of spamming it over and over, trying your best to take it, and there's like 15 of you, and you've all kind of found you're just control effing the rules manual? Is that,
Um,
or do y'all like
it
all read the
did.
actual rules manual and then anything you don't know offhand you go and look up?
It's a bit of both. I know that like the first time that we did it, and I was not in charge of strategy at all. I was just a lowly CS member sitting there twiddling my thumbs, going, "I've never been to any of this. What's going on?" No clue what was happening. We were control Fing everywhere.
Yeah.
When I took over as captain and was also strategy lead, I was able to mostly just click the rule like off the top of my head and like, oh, I know this one. I've seen this before. And some of that still translates today where I'm like, I can remember certain rules kind of by accident, just by virtue of like, oh, I've done this so many years now that it's like in my brain, right?
Yeah.
I would say that it got better as time went on when I was on the team. Like we were less and less actually checking, but I would not necessarily say that like. So I guess the way that I did this, if we're going into the strategy thing, the way that I did this is that prior to comp, I wrote a comprehensive document that was just like quick guide to the most important rules and strategy for our drivers and for anyone else who like wants to like who's on the pit crew. And my goal was test them on that. So I gave like everyone a Google form, and you would just test your knowledge on that Google form of like what I thought was important or necessary. Um, you would then also read that guide, and it was a it was like a 10 pager. It was not as long as the actual rule book, but it was still like decent enough that it would cover all the game rules, the mechanics, and like interesting interactions and strategies I thought would occur. Like I actually guessed like double standard and how you beat it. I wrote like a specific thing, like here's how you beat double standard, because we'll see it with Purdue. Here's how you'll beat this kind of strategy, like VT strategy of going behind your base, because I know they'll try it, right? Like things like that. I wrote little tiny things on different teams. And then that's basically what I just like dropped between the team. I don't know if they've kept this practice up. It was a long endeavor on my part that was very personal and I was very engaged in.
Yeah.
I would assume no one has gone through it, but like, yeah, I want to do what Shaur did. That seemed like a fun time because I feel like they would be spending weeks on that, given how many more teams there are now and how much more there is to like do in the game. But I felt like that really helped me get an appreciation for the rules and helped the people that were on my team at the time get an appreciation for the rules.
Oh, Shaur. See, I'm not going to go and say that you waste your time because that would be mean of me. But what you effectively did was you did all this development on yourself and you got all this intimate knowledge for yourself and you put it in a guide, and I'm sure somebody skimmed it, but the vast majority of what you put in was not absorbed in a meaningful way. And it's because I think it's not your fault. You didn't know any better, I don't think. But a lot of, if strategies approached in RoboMasters, a lot of people approach it as engineers and not competitors. And
yep. This was my major flaw.
Again,
I would say.
It's not out of malice. Most people just kind of don't know any better. But you can write the best 10-pager in the world. You can write the best strategy guide in the world, and people might read it, and a lot of people might even understand it. But if you are not implementing it in a way that it is practiced and like, I don't care who reads it, like it's not really going to do anything for you. I think that you're not the only team that has done something like this. I know that the one year that I drove, our strategy team basically said, hey, here's a little document we put together of some strategies, and it had some colorful diagrams on it, and I looked at it and said, okay, I'll try to remember that. And then I never thought about it again. Those situations never came up. And
I think, I agree with you. It's nice to have a playbook, but unless you're actually practicing the plays out of the playbook, there's no point to have the playbook because it's going to sit there and no one's going to do it. And that was one of the things I think that I personally would change if I had gotten back in time. Like, obviously there's a level of the hardware needs to be ready, which it was never ready at the time that I hoped it would be.
Stop. Wicked record scratch noise. So let's talk about that because A&M has never had their hardware ready. Not ever. I maybe got a leak today that their hardware is still not ready, and it's freaking June 8th. So
everything's fine.
Yeah, so we'll dive in right now. We'll talk about, I'm at least aware of 3 different ways that John implemented practice for a team that did not have ready hardware. Because, again, I'm going to start making a list of coach tips for RMNA teams. I understand that for most teams, saying, oh, just build an extra set of robots and skirmish with each other on your field is unreasonable for a million reasons, right? You don't have 5 robots. They're not ready before June. You don't have a field that's big enough to skirmish more than maybe 1v1, right? If you have any field at all. So, John, pick one, and I'll throw up the associated things. What practice style do you want to discuss first?
So, if you don't mind, I want to take a little bit of a tangent before I get there.
Nope, we're going on a road. We're going on a road. Pick a practice style.
Oh, damn, I'm going to get railroaded here. Sorry for the... All right. Let's just go with the usage of other esports style games. I think that is a really big one. I think we've got that image around.
Yeah, is that this one?
Esports
yeah, that's the one.
Bunch of gamers. These are gamers at work.
All there. And like I said, being that your job as a strategy lead, if you will, which again, not a name I'm a fan of, but whatever. Being that your job is to build a team, I think for the very first while, since you don't have hardware, you have to make it not be about the robots. And so we need to make it about the team. How are we going to build a team? Well, we need to apply soft skills that are translatable, that don't have anything to do with actually having functioning hardware. So what I like to do is I'm trying to evaluate my drivers that might potentially end up in the competition. I'm trying to figure out who I want to put where, right? And so I'm having them play these different games. And one thing I would say is a big tip, a big John tip, if you will, make it a game that is not maybe super familiar to your pool of drivers. So if you've got someone who's a crazy, semi-pro league player, don't play League. If you got someone who's crazy into Overwatch, don't play Overwatch. That's not the point. The point, how good you are at the respective video games, has literally nothing to do with what we're doing here. We're practicing taking something that feels kind of familiar that you're not an expert in, and communicating with your teammates around you to put forth the best competitive effort at a time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right,
John.
I'll be right back. Y'all keep going.
We'll keep going. John, it's actually interesting about that you just mentioned to me, having like other esports games. So funnily enough, in our time that we've been graduated, I think that other RoboMaster teams have decided, we're kind of bored of not having a RoboMaster style game to play in that's like simulatable and esports style, right? Have you heard of RoboSouls, perchance?
I sure haven't, Shaur. I was wondering when you were talking about it earlier. I was wondering what the heck you were talking about.
RoboSouls is South China University of Technology decided, hey, what if we made like a real a video game version of RoboMasters, like a real video game that you just play. There's no hardware required, not even necessarily they have the same field, they have the same robot styles. That's about it. Like the balancing is able to jump like B-hop essentially. It's like you're playing an actual hero shooter with the RoboMaster style robots, but it works like an actual FPS. There's no tipping over. There's no hardware involved. Very much it's not even like a real simulator, right? It's a video game. This game released not too long ago. And as I have been told today, I've been talking with the devs about doing an English translation. They finally have an open beta for it to do an English translation that they're launching either tonight or tomorrow. Yeah, it's right there. RoboSouls demo. Yeah, that one.
Wow, it's even got the RoboMaster's font and everything going. I would have killed for this, when we were trying to put together, meaningful driver, tryouts and team building stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And so once that beta is fully live, I will be announcing a little tournament for that for Saturday where people can pick their drive teams, hopefully, and jump in together and do that. Which now that you mentioned it, John, is actually a great way to get some practice a week before comp to make sure that your drive team is cohesive. So
super
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So practice style number 1 was video games, right? And now that can be even something like RoboSouls, which is freaking awesome. Shout out to that's Scott, right? That's South China, and that's Shaur for helping with the English translation side of that. I ran to my garage to grab visual number 2. Steven, I love that question. We will totally tackle it at the end. I think that's an excellent question to discuss.
I also like that question, and I'm interested to weigh in on that one.
So, practice style number 2 that our team used without having developed or built the robots was using S1s. So the way that this happened for A&M, and it can look a lot of different ways. Maybe your team is flush with cash. I doubt it, because most RMNA teams aren't. But maybe your team is flush with cash, and you're just going to buy a fleet of S1s. They're not terribly expensive, compared to an actual RoboMasters robot. They're like $300 or something. You can actually find them.
Can you buy those, by the way? I thought that they were discontinued in the US.
They made new ones. This one is discontinued. They made new ones.
That was discontinued.
Yeah, but they made new S1s that have a removable turret that can turn into an engineer as well.
Cool.
And I don't think those ones are discontinued. But if they are discontinued, you can totally get them on Facebook Marketplace. But you can drive them from your computer, keyboard and mouse. You can play IR laser tag with other S1s. They drive with Mechnum wheels because it's a very weird drive system. So it lets you get a lot of the the next step towards real RoboMasters driving from a video game, but without having to have your code done and your robots done, and without accidentally screwing things up, right? I mean, there's always a little bit of push and pull. I know I look really supportive now, but back when John was actually strategy lead and I was still up there doing hardware at A&M, there was quite a bit of push and pull on, okay, cool, I get you want to practice with our bots, but if our code isn't done and we're not developing code and you're driving the chassis around and slamming into walls because the code kind of only works and your drivers kind of suck still, and now things are even worse than they were, right? The wires
Yeah.
aren't wire managed. We're gonna chew them up, whatever.
All the suspensions are broken, and now I
Yeah.
have to fix them overnight before competition.
Exactly. So the S1s were a great option. What A&M did to acquire them was year 1 and year 2, you could either pay your dues for the whole year, or if you bought an S1 and allowed the team to use it, you didn't have to pay dues that year. And that is how A&M got their S1s for the team for the first several years. I actually just got mine back
Nice.
from A&M today. So they had mine from 20, I don't know, like
20?
2020-ish.
2020 to 2025, right? They totally
5
got their
years.
money's worth, which is great. And I only went and got it because I'm scared now that everyone I know has graduated that it was just gonna like make its way into inventory and my S1 would be gone forever.
I'm a little surprised you didn't try to sell it to him.
Oh, I don't want to sell it to him, John. This is my favorite piece of RoboMaster's memento. I mean, look, it's a little tiny standard. It's the cutest dang thing. Plus, Purdue did this amazing thing. If you haven't watched the Midwest Conference, go check it out. You can watch the VOD on YouTube on RoboMaster North America. At the Midwest Conference, they actually used it as an on-field roaming camera in between games because you can live stream the view from it. And so they just drove it around looking at the robots and stuff. Used it as a cameraman. It was really neat. So I got big plans for this little guy. Anything else you want to say on the S1, John? I think they were awesome. I mean, y'all cracked an S1, so there's definitely something to be said for old Preston and his worries that driving practice was going to hurt the robots. But
Well, you can't blame me for advocating for my own,
no, I'm
purposes.
not. And frankly, right? I mean, basically, what you were advocating for was just play testing the robots and finding like maybe we would have had less mechanical issues if we had let y'all be rougher on the robots before comp. But like most teams back in the day, A&M, we were having a tough time when you and I were on the team getting things early enough, like getting things done early enough that like, okay, we have time to fix it still, right? So
For sure. But one thing I would like to say about the S1s is, like you're saying, we had the luxury of having, I think, 4 or 5 of them around. We definitely had enough for at least 2v2s for sure.
mhm.
I know a lot of teams would be lucky to have 2. That being said, in order to really maximize your potential, the potential gain that you're going to get from having your drive team sort of practice on S1s, uh, scale modeling the field. Not anything super crazy. Just we're talking about some folding tables arranged and some plywood barriers, things like that, to actually give them a sense of what traversing around a map that has real obstacles, as well as kind of maneuvering around cover and blind spots and all this other stuff. That will really help you maximize your potential with S1s as opposed to just like here's a flat living room with 2 S1s, go play.
Yeah.
Um, just little things like that.
All right, so kind of continuing on our path of more and more more and more like directly applicable methods of practice, but also obviously getting more and more difficult to implement. We had playing video games together works on communication, works on team strategy, right? Also, probably I would bet John helps you find like the leader of your team. I know 2v2s, right? Or technically 3v3, but 2v2 humans, maybe that's not quite as important, but you need someone to be calling the shots.
Absolutely. A big part of the reason we played, so one of the video games we played was Paladins, and like I was, for those of you that don't know, Paladins is a kind of a Wish.com version of Overwatch. The reason I picked that game is because I believed it was a game that would feel familiar, uh, ish, but that no one was going to be a pro in. And what I was really looking for was, all right, I'm going to try my you know drive candidates, if you will. They weren't the drive team yet because they hadn't been picked. I'm going to try my drive candidates at different roles. We're going to rotate them around, and we're going to kind of see how does the communication work. Who ends up, taking the lead? Is there any leadership? Who? How does the team dynamic sort of naturally begin to form in scenarios like that? And so you sort of take notes of that, and you kind of write down in pencil, again in pencil because it could change. Write down in pencil. Okay, here's who's really good at being kind of in a support role. Here's who's a really good leader. Here's who has really good skills when it comes to actually like game mechanics. Here's who's really good at just aiming, right? Whatever. Just take notes about your people because that's really what it's about in the early stages more than anything. And so
Yeah.
by the time you get to 2v2s, maybe your shot color is a little less important, but that doesn't matter because you already should have ideas about your team members and how to put them where they can put themselves in the best position to make good choices.
I gotcha. Okay, so I'm gonna keep us going through this list of practice. In my mind, unless I've missed something, the next step up for aimbots from S1s was real robots, which I'm just gonna do RR. So real bots. Well, let me just do bots. Um, but not like skirmishing, right? Like we'll just do skirmish as the last one. Like
Yeah, so
obviously, if you can skirmish, that's the freaking best, but also super not feasible for most teams. So I'm gonna throw up an image of one of the ways that John would have our teams practice when we had one functional bot or a half functional bot. So this particular image, I'll let John talk on it for a second about its purposes and things. But you could do this type of practice even if you just had a functional pitch, yaw, and VTM and projectile launching, right? Like you don't need chassis. If you have a fully functioning bot, this is awesome. Obviously the environment that it's in is built out of PVC pipe and like some mesh, right? So this was not an established permanent or semi-permanent field. So John, go ahead and talk about kind of the purposes of this practice and explain a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. So like Preston was saying, what you're kind of looking at is a semi-permanent structure that we could just shoot in. You see that folding chair in front of the standard. That's not there by accident. That was part of the exercise, and uh, this was back when the Sentry was on the rail, mind you. So one of our exercises that we did was we want to practice firing up, looking up and firing at a target at different distances. And so what we did was we set up these cubes, which are like RMUC gold cubes, right? And we just had the standard shoot them up off the rail. They'd shoot the first two at the first distance, back up, shoot the next two, and then back up and shoot the last two.
Did someone's video go out? Did Wi-Fi go out?
Oh, I can hear you, Shaur. I can see you.
Good?
Oh, I think the stream went down for a sec.
I see that I've dropped 0 frames.
No. We're back, actually. Never mind. I can hear you too, Preston. I cannot hear John anymore.
I'm here. Are we good? Can we?
Yeah,
Can we be
Steven
heard?
says he's good. John, I can still hear John.
Never mind then. No clue. No clue what happened there.
You ran away from your
Continue
chair.
on. I did go away from my chair for a second, but then I was back and I was listening and I was like, okay, we're talking about the standard and how we're shooting at the Sentry height.
Yeah. So we talked about the S1s, and now we're talking about using actual bots, but without like skirmishing. Like if you just have one bot.
So let's say we've got our one bot, and we're doing a few things here. We're practicing shooting at odd angles and odd distances. We're, kind of practicing accuracy, and we're also timing it. So one of the things that I wanted my drivers to garner from this, aside from the obvious of just aim practice, is kind of operating under pressure. So I made it very clear, like, hey, the objective of this exercise is to finish it as fast as possible. And, they're to get to the different distances, they're backing up. They don't have vision. They just kind of know the sort of motion they're supposed to make. And just kind of watching how they, handle that pressure of, hey, if you've only got 5 seconds left or whatever it is, and kind of helping them get used to that, for one, is a big part of it, and then just improve on that.
Yeah.
And we don't have pictures of it. We did all kinds of things with one robot. So we had shooting drills, like that's one of the ones that you just saw. We did obstacle courses to get them used to just like, here's what your VTM sees, and here's like the footprint of your robot, and like when you bump things, how does your bot react, and getting used to latency. I mean, that's a big adjustment for a lot of people who are used to 1 millisecond, response times. Is, oh, this is the real world. We've got, 150, 200 milliseconds of latency.
Yeah, I'll bet this year is a year we see a little bit more of teams kind of finding their shoulders of their robot. The VTM for almost every robot design doesn't let you see where the edges of your robot are. And in the past, that's really important in RMUC, but like, you'll see on the RMUC robots come back tomorrow. We'll be doing RMUC, streaming
Woo.
a semifinals for the central region. It's going to be hype. And I'll bet you every single one of those bots has little roller wheels all along the sides so that they can just kind of smash into corners and walls sometimes, and it's okay.
Yeah.
RMNA, that hasn't been such a big deal because the map has largely just been like one wall on either side. Its speed hasn't been as critical if it wasn't like in this straight line alley right down the base. Now the map's basically an S, like it's an S-shaped map.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot more about turning and cutting corners and trying to keep fast drive efficiency.
Yeah, keeping in mind also that the corners on those maps are all bumpy and
Yeah.
not necessarily easy to traverse either as fast, especially if you don't have a great drive system. So yeah, movement is going to be a lot more important on this map. That's kind of one of the reasons why we're using this in the first place.
And then just to highlight, and hopefully A&M is pumped about this opportunity that I have to speak highly of A&M's RoboMasters team, because sometimes I'm a bit of a butt about their lack of robot reliability. But John and the A&M team are known, obviously we've talked about Elizabeth ad nauseum an episode or two ago, right? And her great skills and things. And John sent me, one of the clips where the aimbots won this round 3, right? This is a 1-1, so best of 3. This is the tie-breaking round. You can see Elizabeth winning this round right here. 1 minute and 11 seconds left to go, getting this objective lead, and it's this exact thing that they've been practicing, right? Yeah. It's sitting about 5 feet back from the sentry. The sentry's moving back and forth. She's uncontested. It's just how accurate can you be? And we see it, Shaur, all the time in RMUC, right? The huge difference between drone pilots that are extremely accurate and drone pilots that are not. I mean, it's the difference between a world-class RMUC team and like a mid-tier regionals team. Mm-hmm. So bots by themselves without skirmishing can be super impactful. I don't want to spend a lot of time on skirmishing. It's the best. If you're a team that can skirmish, it's great. And you should start focusing on what I want to talk about briefly next. Beyond practice, one of my tips, and Shaur's already talked on it, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But it's like enemy evaluation. So Shaur discussed, making a document beforehand. I think that's great. We've discussed previously in podcasts, making sure you have someone watching the games, right? When you see them pull a trick out, you need to know that they have that craziness.
Yep.
It's not every team, but some of the teams have a trick, and some of the teams have like one strategy. And it's just so easy to implement if you know, and if you don't know, it's the most painful thing to watch from the audience perspective, where you're like, hey, we've been watching Virginia Tech go for the base all day. They're going for your base. You're not looking. You're not watching. You've lost. Like it can be tough. But I understand like the engineering drive is to, you're trying to fix your bots and improve little things and get some marginal gains, and so no one's watching the games. Put the stream on in your pit. Send one person to go and watch the games in person. Something, anything. Just sticking.
They're also just fun to watch.
Yeah, they're super fun to watch. 100%.
They're just fun to watch. I was gonna say, Preston, part of that enemy evaluation as well, in my opinion, is like watching old matches before competition. Do some prep work. Just watch like one or two. Just throw on some old matches of yours, especially if you have like robots that are pretty similar. You've done some iterative design. You haven't changed a ton of stuff. See what broke. Like just do a review for yourself. I guarantee you don't remember everything at competition. I don't remember everything at competition. I've had to rewatch a ton of stuff, and I just get to sit there and watch the entire time. Yeah, like live chess puzzles, exactly.
It doesn't have to be
chess puzzles. I think John did this at A&M, where you would take a moment from a match and you show it to them and try and see if they know how each team can win from there.
Yep.
Right? Like it's classic for chess. You look at the board and you're like, okay, how does white mate in 3? it works for
Yeah.
RoboMasters. It's actually really fun. Like, just take a clip and say, look, who do you think wins? And also, how do you win if you're red? How do you win if you're blue? Like, what do you need to be doing now?
Yeah.
And if you're just getting started, it doesn't have to be anything super high level. I think just by, even if you watch the matches, previous RMNA type stuff, right? And you don't take any notes, you are naturally just going to observe different behaviors and kind of apply that without any effort. Now, if you take even the smallest amount of effort, uh, you're going to be so much further ahead. And like Preston's saying, if you can have one person just, because everybody knows during the competition, if you're one of the competition team members, you're in the pits, you're trying to get, repair stuff that broke, you're doing all these things. But if you can just have one person whose job is to sit, and watch the actual tournament and notice trends and say, hey guys, you're about to play team such and such, they're gonna bait you into a team fight in the middle, and then while your standards are distracted, they're gonna run a hero over towards your base and start, taking some uncontested shots, and they're gonna win by that 200 base health before, more often than not. Just like little stuff, just noticing behaviors more before you've even sat down to figure out counter strategies. Just noticing behaviors goes such a long way.
Yeah. We're gonna go a little bit rapid fire now because there's a bunch of these. So I'm gonna do one. If either of y'all have other just like coach tips that you want to put on here, one sentence coach tip from Preston is know thyself.
Know thyself.
You need to apply the coach tips and the strategy and the practice that are appropriate for your current team level.
Because it definitely scales.
It scales. Yeah. If you're competitive in the top 4, you should be practicing like for this upcoming comp. If you want to be competitive in the top 4, you need to be thinking about handoffs of the central buff point. You need to be thinking about how to play around your really good fully autonomous sentry. You need to be thinking about those kinds of things. If you're in the bottom 6 and you're just trying to get a win, like in groups, not get out of groups, just get a win, which is awesome. You need to be thinking about things like, how do we play together as a team? You need to be thinking things like, how do we get an early kill without dying? How do we get a tiny gold lead that we can use to kind of steal this one? Can we take the central buff point in the last minute and then just hold it? How late can we wait before it's unwinnable, right? Very different strategies that you should be considering. Know thyself. Quick tips? Anyone got a quick tip?
Have a plan. It sounds
know your
stupid.
robots. I think this is kind of similar to know thyself, but I think it's like your robots are not going to be perfect. If you know, for example, like, oh, my hero keeps, this is an example for last year. If you're like, I know my hero is going to jam because we just haven't built this part right. Kind of know ahead of time that might happen and like play around it. Save it till the very end, where it's like, oh, now I need to hit the base health. Like, use it as an example. Like, try to see like what can you do to level the advantage between them and you. Assume the other team always has fully functioning bots. Never go in being like, yes, they have not this bot, so I can plan like that's not going to happen. I feel like it's a bad idea to plan for the team's robots aren't going to work, because then you might hit yourself with a little bit of a surprise there. But yes, Preston, what do you guys say? Oh, and John too, I guess.
Enemy evaluation. The live part of enemy evaluation can be looking at whose bots are actually doing the full things, right? You need to know what bots you're afraid of and what bots you're not. Teams will just bluff you.
That is true.
Right? Like you need to be able to call that. Part of what I think top-ish tier teams can be instilling in their drivers is a little bit of chutzpah, just like a little bit of guts. Just have a little bit of grit, right? Get in there, and if that robot isn't actually killing you, take a little bit of poke damage. Don't leave quite yet. Don't take a ton. Know where that health bar needs to get to, where you need to turn around and run. But like, I see so frequently where a robot is fighting another robot and one of those bots has like 5 projectiles, and I'm like, dude, but those first 5 are so scary, and then the driver runs off. All right, John, have a plan. What you got?
So, I went back in doing research for this because I have full transparency, been out of the RoboMasters game as a you know for a little while now, so I had to kind of refamiliarize myself with where things are. So I went and watched the what RMUL actually looks like these days because feel like it sort of helps to be informed on that sort of thing before you come on a podcast. Um, but I noticed when I was watching some of the RMUL footage from China, like you have robots that are not moving for 5, 10, 15 seconds in the match because they're still trying to figure out, okay, who's buying what projectiles, how are we spending our gold first, where are we going to go. You don't if you're doing that in the match, it's too late. You need to already decide, all right, standard's going to buy projectiles, hero's going to hold off, or whatever the plan is. You're going to go around and occupy central buff point. I'm going to get up on top of the elevation and post up, or whatever your plan is. It doesn't have to be anything super in depth, but like that first 15 20 seconds, I think, especially nowadays, is where that match is won or lost. For the first 30 seconds of the match, you really should be pretty much choreographing everything. Have a plan.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that's great, especially in this coming RMNA. Getting out of base quickly is super important because the central buff point is first come, first serve. I have two questions I want us to discuss, and then we're going to call it a night. Chat, let me know in the comments, especially post-produced comments. What you think? What do you like about the report? What do you not like about the report? Obviously, this is our first report. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Would you... Let me know.
Did you watch it again?
So question number one, before we get to Steven's question, is I want to take a second and talk about... Well, let me just give an anecdote. It's going to be a really long question, right? Here comes the question. I have zero interest in being a professional athlete. This is not copium. This is not me pretending like I don't want to be a professional athlete just because I don't have the athletic prowess to be a professional athlete. Anytime I go do like a disc golf tournament, or like I went and helped my buddy train for a half Ironman today, so we biked 60 miles this morning, and I am in that moment and I'm like, dang, I'm getting dropped by this front group of riders, or like, oh my gosh, I got to make this putt to win the tournament, and I don't make the putt, and it's super stressful, and it's like, I think to myself, man, I'm so glad I'm not a professional athlete. Like, the amount of stress that I would feel in these clutch moments, if my livelihood depended on me clutching in these moments, would be too big for me. It's too much for my britches. I need my stress smoothed out over long periods of time, like engineering work, where it's high risk and stressful, but in nice long moments where I can control and I can just work more hours and put more thought and effort into it and slowly build this performance, right? So we've seen some teams like NUS go the route of getting players who are actually competitive video game players, like who are used to the personal responsibility that brings. I think we're still young enough as a competition that the majority of drivers, it's my opinion, that they are not ready for the personal responsibility that driving kind of brings. Right now, we all commentate with some very kind lenses, and everyone at the competition and teams are handling everything very gently, which is nice. But I think I guess what I'm saying is, do you have any thoughts and opinions on driver selection, finding people that really can put up with that pressure and maybe enjoy that pressure? And then my second half of that question is, are we going to see this year, maybe next year, the very top teams having drivers who can tolerate, who can thrive, who can be okay with the transition that we're trying to make? I mean, Shaur is, I mean, this, look at this man. That's the face of an absolute psychopath. He wants us to get the driver names for the teams. He wants us to be able to reference, like, he wants us to be like, where it's not going to be, oh, dude, Red Hero 1 had the winning shot, turned around, like, I guess was in the central buff point, would have won the game if he had just stayed, but he chased this kill and lost the game. Now it's going to be like, oh my goodness, John from Texas A&M through the game,
Look,
just handed it
I want
over to the
to
opposite team.
remind everyone before we fearmonger by accident that I'm getting the drivers' names to compliment you guys because you will also
Yes.
make good plays. You will
Yes,
make good plays.
you will.
But yeah, I guess to kind of go into the actual question here, I think that in general, okay, so I've been doing these leak streams. Obviously, one was today. We had another one last week. We've been doing these leak streams quite often now, where we're seeing the development teams have been making, and we have had some teams from all across the skill set, right, come through. Teams that are starting. This is their first year ever. They're only in 1v1 versus teams that have been playing the entire time. Virginia Tech, for example, or Oedo, or NUS, right, giving us all these different leaks that they have. And I feel like everyone is thinking about I think that this year, and I said this on the league stream as well, I think everyone is thinking about strategy a little bit. I think we're going to see even some of the weaker teams still prioritizing and making some plays, and I'm really excited for that. Maybe that's a bit of a hard whoa, that's not actually going to happen, Shaur. You're completely wrong, but I could really believe it. I could really believe that if there's any year, it's going to be this year.
I 100% agree. I think I said last week, this year and next year are the golden ages of RMNA. And so I'm
Yep.
saying, do our drivers have what it takes? Are our drivers the last piece to become a competitive esport? Like our robots, I think
Yeah.
what you're saying is our robots are there now. We're going to have
Yeah.
7, 8 teams that are really mechanically adept. I
Sound.
expect to
Yep.
see at least 6 or 7 teams where the robot performance is high. And like
Yeah.
you're saying, the strategy is going to start to be high. And when your
Yep.
strategy's
Yep.
high and your bots are high, it now plays like the esport it was designed to be in the summer. It's an engineering program in the school year, it's an esport in the summer. And once it's an esport in the summer, the difference will be the strategies and the drivers. And so I'm saying, are our drivers, do you think our community is ready for that shift where the responsibility of the team winning or losing the game is on the drivers? Because I think a lot of our community feels what Steven is asking, which is, does strategy / drivers really even have a large impact if our robots are, not on the same level playing field? Do you think our drivers are ready? Is the community ready for the drivers to be the winning or losing factor and not the robots?
I think I think we're a long way past the 2021, 2022 days where it was sacrilegious to say that a driver messed up, right? I think we're at the level now where it's you can definitely not necessarily pin it on the drivers, but I think that driver execution is going to become more important, especially this year. And by nature of it being more important, you're going to have to accept the drivers are going to make mistakes. They make a mistake, it happens to the best of us, but that is going to cost games, that is going to cost rounds, and that's going to be a deciding factor. It's something we have to talk about as a media team. It's required of us. It would be a disservice to our community, to the people that watch this, to anyone who ever comes in as a non-engineer, right? To not explicitly tell them, yeah, that was something that was avoidable. I would feel like we're not showing the game in its best light. That's the best kind of game where you can make a mistake in piloting. That's what we like to see, where skill matters, where attention to detail matters, right?
And to Shar's point, we will purposefully try and take things from the positive angle, right? So for example, if we have two teams that are really, really close and then one team gets triple killed, they get aced, they're all dead, and the other team wins for getting all the victory points for those kills, right? Instead of looking at it from the perspective of a throw where they took a bad fight and they all died, which is true in that instance, you can look at it in, wow, this other team really clutched up, found the last victory points they needed and won, right? So we can take that from this positive spin and we're going to put that positive spin on. But there are instances like Shar's describing where sometimes it is an actual throw, right? So you move out of the central buff point and you just stop gaining you're not gaining victory points anymore, or you push forward as one robot with no projectiles, they kill you, and there goes the 20 victory points they needed to win the tie. Sometimes you hand the game over through a mistake, and I am glad, Shara, to hear that you think our community is ready for that to be identified, because I agree with you. I think for this game to progress in the way that I think it should and is, I think we need to be moving with the game. Our robots are at a point for a lot of teams where it is a game now. It's not just a robot showcase. Um, when it pops up, and when it pops up, it's spicy, right? Like, I mean, NUS UW last year comes to mind, where the bots were really good, and it was really close. And so then we're talking about things like the RFID scandal, and we're talking about, like, there are other factors we're starting to look at.
Yeah.
Um,
And we have to we have to call attention
yeah,
to it. I think the biggest
gotta
thing
call it.
is like, I think the biggest thing, and this is something that I worry about a little bit in my head, is like, again, that's somebody's kid.
Yep.
That's someone's kid who's just, they're not getting paid like an actual esport. They're not getting paid
Yep.
like a real sport. They're completely doing this volunteer except for fun. And I think part of that is gonna be like, we need to like I said, slowly transitioning to like putting more onus on the driver. First, let's just give some compliments. Be like, oh wow, that driver did a really cool Heisman style play. Let's bring them in to talk about to them for a second about that. And then as time goes on, maybe we start to hit them with some more like, yo, Elizabeth, you should have just got in there. You would have won. Throwing a little bit, but yeah. Maybe what would help actually, and I think this is something we could definitely ask the drivers. If you guys have gamer tags that you'd rather us use than your real names, just give us those.
Sure.
That's something we could definitely work with instead. That's how it is in esports. It makes it a little bit less personal. And then we all are going to be like at a much better. I might actually write that down. Like, what's your tag? How would you like to be referred to on stream? That's something I'll write down in our sheet.
I think there's two interesting aspects to this question. I think there is a sort of state of RMNA aspect, and there is a more team-centric culture aspect, right? I think that to put all the teams that might see this, at ease about things, for 90% of misplays, there is a corresponding opposite outplay, and I know that our media team is going to focus on the outplay if they can, far more than the misplay, because normally that's the more interesting storyline anyway. You want to focus on, wow, look at this really cool thing that this driver from University A did, instead of just like saying, man, look how crappy the strategy, man, Team B really just threw it. That's not exactly good television, as you would say. But I think the other aspect of it, in terms of, is the community ready? I think that's why a big part of the reason why what we're talking about here is so important is that if you're not just putting together a strategy necessarily, but if you're building teams, you're building drive teams that are well coached, that are well practiced, and have good strategy. Number one, you're going to have less misplays, and so you have to worry about that less. And number two, if you're training your team right, that team should be used to facing adversity and should respond appropriately. I think that being able to mentally reset and move on to the next situation is a very valuable skill for any competitor. Not necessarily something you can teach, but you can certainly coach it to an extent. And I guess what I'm saying is I personally trust anybody who's going to go to the effort to actually put together drive teams with staples that for kind of in the pilot chairs that we want to get the community familiar with on a first name basis. I think those people are going to be prepared for this adversity.
I like it. I will say one of the other, as someone that I think I'm probably one of the people on the media team that most frequently calls out the misplays. One of the reasons that I passionately do that is because the misplay is the thing that I want the team to fix. If there are not coaches and there are not strategy teams and the teams are not looking closely at these games and reviewing footage and looking back at things, if I can just publicly say while their team is all sitting there in the chairs in front of me and just say, man, they really didn't know that the sentry was like the next objective and they shot the standard instead of the sentry, they could have won the game. Yes, I'm saying it from the negative point of view in that game, but not to try and make the driver feel sad, but I'm trying to coach the team. And that's part of what I'm saying. And I think what we're all agreeing is that we're kind of getting out of that era. I'm hoping we're now in a place where the teams will be doing their own coaching. And as a media squad, we can start to just more purely commentate.
It's funny that you would say that, Preston, because
Bottom
you're
line is
talking
always
about
read the rules.
in RMUC with the soundproof box versus in RMNA, everybody's just kind of in whatever the competition area is. I'm not gonna lie to you. Both when I was driving and when I was kind of coaching, y'all having the bird's eye view, the God eye, if you
Yep.
will, would say things, and I coached my drivers like, hey, if the commentators give you something, freaking use it.
Yep.
Like, this is not necessarily how maybe RMOC intended things to be, but that's how they are. Anything to increase situational awareness, use that stuff. And y'all coached us mid-match to more than one victory. I'm not even going to lie to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'll answer Steven's question, and then I mean if other people want to weigh in, we can. But guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks for Steven, thanks for being here. John, of course, thank you for coming on and talking with us about coaching. I think we've done a very deep and but hopefully insightful and useful look into coaching and RoboMasters. Steven from chat asked if strategy only comes into play once engineering has reached a plateau. And then he gave examples like supercaps, high level CV, and high robustness, so like a lack of jamming. I will say yes and no, and I'll say yes to the first part of the question. Strategy comes not only, but strategy does come way more into play once it's reached a plateau because that's all you have left to improve. So it becomes more important when your team and the other team's robots are basically the same. Like if you have a worse strategy, but you're in UW's robots and you're fighting, for the sake of not hurting anyone's feelings, I'll use an example like 2019 Texas A&M, right? You don't need strategy. We only had one bot that fired projectiles, and like it was never gonna win, right? A 1v3, we talk about it all the time. A 1v3, you don't need strategy. You're probably just gonna win. It's fairly certain.
Very hard to lose. It is your fight to lose at that point.
Yeah, and you'd have to work really hard to lose it too, in RMNA specifically. So for the high level teams, it is definitely more important once you've reached that high level plateau. For the low teams, I will say those examples are not when you should start looking at strategy. You do not need super caps or high level CV or to have fully eliminated jamming before you look at strategy. Strategy will help those low level teams make a push. It will help you win the fights 2v3 sometimes. It will help you win your matches when you're against the other low level team in your group, low tier team in your group, and this is your one shot to take a win away in RMNA, right? So 10 out of 10, strategy is important for all teams, but it does become more important when your robots are kind of capped out. Like when you've done all that you can do, sure, I think strategy plays a larger role.
I want to turn that on its ear real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know, name any mid-tier team, right? So we're talking about a team who has achieved baseline functionality. Maybe they're not doing anything super fancy with CV or really anything. Maybe they're not pushing super caps, whatever. But we've got robots that are gonna, more often than not, they're gonna come out here, they're gonna drive, and they're gonna shoot. And I think if you take that team that has achieved that baseline functionality, reliability, and you put in drivers, okay, that have been coached on, hey, here's the reality of what our robots are. We're going up against a team who has better robots, but I don't know, they didn't practice, they're not strategizing. Yes, their one robot is better than our one robot, but I'll be willing to bet that in a lot of situations, their one robot's not better than our two robots. And so
John,
if you're playing together and you're actually maneuvering tactically, utilizing your angles, capitalizing on communication, situational awareness, you are going to elevate yourself from, I don't know, maybe kind of a top 10-ish team to comfortably inside that top 8 just for free. It is free. It costs $0. You just prepared your team a little better.
Would you
so it
say
absolutely matters
that is the story of A&M for the last several years? Because you and I both know that team does not have super caps. They might this year. I have no idea. But in the past couple of years, they have not had supercapacitors. They have had jamming problems. They haven't been using high-level CV. Their sentry hasn't worked. They have been effectively a mid-tier team. And when you described a mid-tier team, I'm like, dang, that's A&M. But they're in the top 4 every year. So is A&M the perfect example of a team who has probably, I don't know, 6th or 7th place robots, but then uses strategy and ends up 3rd or 4th every year?
Let me put it to you this way. The year that I was strategy lead and coaching, again, we've beaten this to death, but it is just a good example. Elizabeth, so up until that point, the practice had been either the team lead will drive, or if the team lead for whatever hero standard doesn't want to drive, they'll delegate it off to whoever they picked. It didn't matter. We didn't do it. But whenever I took over, as strategy lead and said, hey, I want to start doing this drive team stuff, I took somebody who was a freshman from the engineer team that no one had ever really met, was not, really on probably Preston's radar at the time, just another person on the team.
Yep.
I evaluated and we said, you're driving our standard based on the evaluations we've done. And the rest is history. So whether we're secretly a 6th, 7th place team, I don't know about that. Maybe. But what I'm telling you is we have the receipts.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have all these things. Like, do it today. It works. Like, and again, if your robots don't drive and don't shoot, like you're not there yet, praying for you. Can't wait to see you get there. Super excited for your team. Strategy is not going to help you a whole lot. I'm not going to lie to you. But if you've achieved just the baseline, strategy is for you today. Do it today.
Agreed. That's all my thoughts on RoboMasters coaches. Chad, if you have extra thoughts, leave them in the chat, in the chat or in the comments. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow. All of those things, we really appreciate it. Comp is starting super soon.
Comp is in 15 days. You all know how I know, Preston? Because I'm making those posts every day. And it's the number is stuck in my head right now.
Heck yeah, bro. One of the things you can do is you can watch the rep recap on Monday and Wednesday this week. We'll do it again next week. Just watch the streams. It'll get you hyped for the competition. It will also provide you with an example and an opportunity to watch some play from third-person point of view. Have your drivers watch it. Have your coaches watch it. Have them watch it on different Twitch accounts so that we get more viewers. All those things. Shaur, any last thoughts from you? Anything I'm missing?
Yeah, final thoughts. Saturday as well. On top of that, we're going to be doing that Robo Souls tournament that I mentioned earlier. So if you want to employ at least one part of what we talked about today and do some actual game together with your drive team, perfect opportunity. That'll be the best opportunity for you to be able to do that. So we'll definitely throw that up there. I'll throw it as an announcement as well.
How big is the team? Is it 3v3?
We're going to do 3v3s. Yes, you'll have
with someone controlling a sentry?
Yeah, you'll have someone specific. So you don't even have to rely on bad sentry design or bad sentry software. You have a working sentry. You can win. But yeah, and then last thing I'll say is this community, I said this in the RMNA League stream, so I feel like I'm going to repeat this here. This community has grown so much in the past, just a year alone, in terms of the quality of the robots, the quality of the discussion, the quality of the drivers. Please go to the social medias for RMNA and please like those posts. I'm working so hard. I'm daily posting. I'm a content creator now, but for RoboMasters, and it's horrible. It's a horrible life to have. So please make it a little bit easier on me. And with all that, thank you again, John, for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on stream. It's been awesome to get to talk to you and talk about your coaching abilities and what you've done so far. But yeah, thanks everyone. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.